Nick, thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure having you on the show, and I'd love to dig deeper into some of the insights from your latest book. If you wouldn't mind for our audience to just share a little bit about yourself and what you've been up to.
Hey KP, thanks for having me. Sure, so a little bit of background story. I've always been fascinated with learning. That's my main subject. I'm fascinated by how we learn and how to learn. So I took it upon myself to do this research on how to improve the process, and it took several years just compiling this information. And I wanted to create a life guide for myself on how to learn better, and that kind of led to writing this book on learning and mastering skills.
So, can you tell us a little bit about the big idea behind the book? What's the key thing that somebody who picks up the book, what are they going to learn?
Sure. So the main idea is that most of the time we see an amazing performance. We see like the polished performance of different people, the refined work. As an example, a book, you see the final product, you don't see all the drafts, all the edits, all the work that goes behind it. So it's the same when you see a great athlete playing a championship game or a musician playing a concert, things like that. So we're seeing the illusion, the end result, the glamour of it, but we're not seeing the process that took them there. So because we don't see the process, many times we believe that we could not be capable of doing the same thing, that we don't have it in us, that we don't have the talent, that we can never reach those heights. And the reality is that yes, there is a process we all can follow, and we can improve and learn any skill we want to. It's just a matter of understanding the process and then following the steps.
And the process in the book, you demystify learning, is that based on interviews, case studies, research? How did you derive that this is the best way to approach learning?
So it's a combination. I wanted to create something that was science-based, but at the same time experience-based from some of the top performers in the world. So I took a lot of reading about, let's say, people like Michael Phelps or Simone Biles or is champion in many sports or artists. So reading about these people and what they had to say about the process, what they had to say about mastery and learning, and then also reading all the research that is out there on how we learn and how to learn. So a lot of it is academic, so it was trying to combine this thing and making something that was very applicable, very useful. Aside from the thesis, like the approach that I'm taking is that of, imagine if you wanted to be a race car driver, you don't need to know all the engineering that goes into a car. You don't need to be a master engineer. You need to be a master driver. So it's kind of the same approach. So I don't go that deep into the science. Yes, I talk about the principles and what goes on in our mind, but the main idea is how to use it, not how it works, but how to use it, which I think is what fascinates people most. It's like, how can I become a better learner, a faster learner?
Perfect. So let's break down the process. Can you share it so we
Sure.
can learn it now? What is the how to become a better learner?
Sure. So let's take one step back and then we can talk about the things that hold people back. So one is what we just spoke about of like the idea that we see the end result, so we think we could not be able to do it. So there is a process behind it. Understanding that by itself is going to help you take on any skill. Then knowing that it is a process that we all have to follow. So it's hard for us to remember that Mozart had to learn to play scales. We don't like to think about that. We just imagine like this great, amazing musician just playing along the greatest symphonies. No, he had to learn the scales just like anyone else. So there is a process we all need to follow, and that's okay. So submitting to that process and walking through that process, like surrendering to the process itself, is one of the steps. The thing is that as we grow up, we get used to doing certain things really well. So we become proficient at a couple of things. So we forget what it feels like to start anew, like a new skill, a new hobby, anything. And then we start and we feel so clumsy and we think there's something wrong with us and we don't have what it takes. We just forgot what it is to learn something. So just remembering that it at the beginning, it's a little bit difficult, but then you get better along the way. So just sharing those two ideas is going to help you learn so much faster. The other one, just before we go into the process, is that mistakes are part of the process itself. So many times we think that it is something wrong in us. We make a mistake, we fail, and we believe this is not for us. Oh, I'm not great at painting. I'm not a good musician, so I'm just going to quit. No, that's just part of the process too. So the willingness to make mistakes and to fail, it's something that's going to take you farther along the way instead of you beating yourself up and thinking you don't have what it takes. So those three things, just on the mindset side of it. Now to the actual process is divided in several steps. So first of all is understanding. So I'll just name them first and then we go one by one. So one is understanding, next is memorizing, practice, bridge, perform. So understanding is about just digesting information. So it's the idea, we read a book, for example, and we understand everything that's in the book. We follow the logic, but sometimes we close the book and a week later we don't remember the lessons. So what happened here? It's okay. There are two different processes. So understanding is different than memorizing. Understanding is just making sense of ideas and following along on a logic path. So also the same reason we go to a seminar, we understand everything, a couple of days later we forgot. So understanding doesn't imply memorization. But we do have to understand things. Otherwise, we could memorize. If we memorize without understanding, is that idea of just knowing facts without really knowing what they mean. So that's how we divide two things. So first, understanding, we go through information. We need to know what we're doing. So in a process like doing an armbar on jiu-jitsu, is like, what are the steps? Why do they follow that logic? Why do I need to grab this person this way? So once you understand, oh, as you're blocking the exit, you're grabbing the arm, then you're applying pressure or levering with your body. So once you understand the process itself, it's going to be easier then to memorize it. So we go understanding, then we go memorizing. This is about internalizing the knowledge. So keeping it within us. Now think about it this way. If you read a book on first aid, and let's say how to give first aid to someone, you understand all the points, you understand all the lessons, but then you're on the street and you can't remember those lessons, and it's useless. So it's not enough to know which book you read it and where is it on your bookshelf. You need the information right then and there. So that's why memorization takes the next step. So first you understand what you need to do, then you start memorizing, internalizing all that knowledge, keeping it with you. Also, we need to remember that mastering something doesn't happen outside of ourselves, it happens on the inside. So all this needs to be taken inside. It's not okay to just have it written down somewhere. We need to memorize it. That's why it's so important. Then we're going to practice. We know the information, let's say, sticking with the armbar example. So we learned what we needed to do, the different steps, we memorized them. Now we need to practice them. So we go into math with a partner, we start trying the armbar, like how do I submit this person? You go over the technique time and again until it kind of ingrains in your body. So that's the practice side of it. It's how do you start executing the things you learned, that you understood and you memorized. So this is putting that knowledge into action. Now, if we wanted to go from practice into performance, jumping the step bridge. So let's say you practice the skill, but then you're thrown into a fight. Like the jump is too big. You need something to narrow that down, so something to bridge those steps. That's where bridging comes in. So bridging is about kind of incorporating everything that you practiced into a realistic scenarios that are going to prepare you for the real thing. So in the example, martial arts is you learn the submission technique. Now have your partner put a little bit more resistance, not let you do it so easily. Move around and start trying it from different positions. So it's still a control environment. It's an extension of practice, but now you're bringing it closer to a real scenario. The last thing then becomes the execution, is performing. That's when you do the submission on a real fight. Now, performance isn't really related directly with learning because you're just executing what you know. On a different example, if I'm always playing the same song I know in guitar, that's not practice, that's not learning. I'm just repeating something I already know, and most likely I'm not going to get much better. Once you have it down at a certain point that is acceptable to you and you're not trying actively to make it better, you're not improving. So then executing just becomes repetition, which yes, it does ingrain those patterns into your mind, but it doesn't work the same way as practice. Practice is the bulk of learning anything. But the execution then gives you the feedback. What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? What do I need to go back to train? So that's kind of the process of learning. Then we can go into improving, which is all about feedback. Like, what happened? What did I do right? What did I do wrong? What do I need to practice more? How do I improve my skills? So that takes care of the improving side. And then mastery itself, there's nothing different about mastery other than the same steps that we mentioned. It's just your commitment towards learning something on the long term. So it's you committing to doing the work every day and doing it for years at a time. So it's kind of the attitude that you have that makes the difference. It's like, am I really committed to the skill? Do I really put in the time and put in the effort? Am I pushing myself? And that's what's going to take you to the next level. So that's kind of the process in a nutshell.
Great. And you mentioned the mastery. So There is this famous statistic that you need to practice something for 10,000 hours before you can become a master. What do you think about that, or what are your thoughts?
Right,
Because I
right.
saw you mention it in the book.
Yes, so I mentioned it in the book because it's just been popularized in the wrong way. And the original research is by K. Anders Ericsson. So he's an expert in expertise and expert performance. So it was a study done on musicians, violinists to be precise. And after the information he gathered, he found out that some of the best musicians in a prestigious music school in Europe had done about 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. Now, there are a few things that we need to break down in there. So, one, it wasn't done across different skills. It was a study done on one specific skill, was violin musicians. Second, it didn't set out to make a mastery timeline. It's not like it will take 10,000 hours for everyone, or it would take 10,000 hours in every skill. Like there are differences. Some skills take less, some skills take more. Also, these students, although they were really good at what they did, they were not masters yet. So they were on the path of becoming some of the best. And this was done on musicians that I think the 10,000 hours was before they turned 19 or 21. I can't remember the exact age, but they had a long way to go. So mastery can actually be 40,000 hours, 30,000 hours, depending on the skill. Then the other part of it is, so it was done on the students, it was done for music. It didn't set out to do a mastery timeline. Also, it talked about deliberate practice, which is a very different kind of practice than just mere repetition, for example. So people think that they go to the golf field and just start hitting balls for 10,000 hours and they're going to be masters. Like, no, deliberate practice has certain requirements to be considered deliberate. So one of them is that you have to be pushing yourself to the edge. So you're supposed to be practicing beyond your current level of skill. You're pushing yourself to the point that you're making mistakes and just kind of reaching out to become better. In music, for example, if you're playing some exercise, like putting the metronome a little bit faster than you can. So where you start making mistakes again, that's pushing you to become better. That's deliberate practice. Repetition is just sitting down and playing the same thing at the same speed. You have been doing it for months or years. That's why some people don't get any better. And maybe they've been doing it for 10 years and they're still not better. So think about people driving. How many years they've been driving, and there's some pretty bad drivers out there. And I bet you they've clocked more than 10,000 hours.
And on the other end of the spectrum, you have Tim Ferriss's popularized
Yes.
MVP or whatever you want to call it. Where does that fall in the spectrum? Is it a good starting point, or how do you think about that?
I would say so. So I think that from Tim Ferriss, he focuses a lot on the minimum efficient dose. Yeah. So he focused on the fundamental certain skill and what you could use the most and has like the most bang for your buck. So I think that's interesting in the sense if you want to learn many different skills and don't want to be a master in any one of them. So like you learn certain things that would put you like will make you go really fast. So for a beginner, you would say like, oh, this person is amazing because you only learn one thing that is very useful and you just practice that as much as you could. So I think for someone that just going into a skill from the sides, like something that may be interested, but they don't want to do that much, the minimum effective dose is really interesting. If you want to write some articles, but you don't want to be a writer, then that's something you can look into. But my approach is mostly towards people that are very serious about a skill, either for a hobby or profession. It doesn't matter. Sometimes you can take on a hobby and be very dedicated to it. And there is a lot of fun in exploring the intricacies and all the nuances, even learning some techniques that might not be the bulk of the skill, but you're just so fascinated by the skill that you also want to learn them and practice them. So it's kind of a different thing. You're not so focused necessarily on results, but you're living a life as a certain kind of individual. So if you think yourself as a musician, is you love music, so you want to learn different things that are not necessarily the most effective things.
And one of the reasons for writing the book, was it because you've seen people make a specific mistake when learning and you wanted to fix that, or that we don't have a process and it makes it more efficient to have a process?
It makes it more efficient to have a process. So the reason for writing the book is that I was frustrated by how long it took to know about something. So to have idea about a skill, like the cognitive side of it, and then turn it into an actual skill that I could use. And I wanted to learn so many things. I've always been passionate about learning. I pick up hobbies all the time, and I was frustrated that I couldn't learn at all, that I was so slow and it took so much time. So I decided to start compiling all this research on how do I become a better learner, how do I optimize the process. And along the way, I figured that if I was going to create this manual for myself, I might as well just turn it into a book and help all the other people that feel the same way.
Is there like an aha moment, something that you changed in the way you were learning after doing that research? Something you may have been doing wrong?
Yeah, a couple of things. So one is not all skills are the same. So some skills are considered to be exact skills. So if you're a classical music interpreter, you have to play the same note at the same time every time. It's exact. So the way you practice that is different than, let's say, chess. So chess is about varied experience. So for exact skills, you need precise experiences. Like you're playing the same song, the same symphony over and over and over again until you have it down. And then for things like chess, is about varied experience. You need to play many games, not the same game over and over again. You will never get better if you play the same game over and over again. So you're playing many games and you create all these patterns of thinking. You start recognizing different structures in the game, positions, different combinations, and that's what's going to make you a better chess player. So just knowing that difference and then understanding, oh, what kind of skill am I going into? And then what kind of practice it requires. So that's one of the things. So I wanted to compose music. I wanted to make songs. And then I was spending a lot of time just playing scales and making the scales better. That's not how you get better at songwriting. So you need to start creating a lot. Same for writing. It's not the same for you to write the same article over and over again. You do a couple of drafts, but it's a better practice for you to create many, and then you become a better writer. Yes, you do the editing, you do many drafts, so you polish that article, but you can't stay on the same thing forever. You need to be moving on, expanding, writing from different perspectives about different subjects, and that's what's going to make you a much better writer. So knowing that difference was a huge aha moment. The other one is that this one is about many times we take on a skill and we turn it into a job. And I did that with playing guitar. I was sitting down, it's like I need to do 30 minutes of exercises and scales. And it took a couple of years before I sucked all the fun out of it, but it eventually happened. So just remembering that, why are we learning this skill? So in the end, we want to play songs, we want to have fun, we want to enjoy it. So also setting up time for those things. I write mostly nonfiction, but every now and then I'll sit down and write a short story. And it's just remembering why we do things and what we enjoy about a skill instead of just doing exercises. Writing would be a very boring hobby or profession if all I did was writing prompts, like sit on a coffee and then write about the person that just came in, without turning it into a story or writing an article or something nonfiction. So just remembering that, hey, it's okay to have fun. Remember why you're doing it. And it doesn't happen to everyone, but some personality types like mine would turn it into a job, and then sooner or later, it's just not fun anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. That happens a lot. And if you had, I think in the book you mentioned different strategies for some of the different parts of the learning process. Do you have a favorite one?
Well, I think just here going into the mastery side of it, what's gonna set the most different is the commitment to the process. So it's just accepting that it's going to take a while, that it's not necessarily easy. It won't always be fun, but in the end, it's going to be rewarding. So a lot of self-development these days, for many years now, is about, hey, it's all good, it's all positive, and you can do it. It's all great. It's all fun. Let's grab hands. It's like, no, mastering something takes a lot of discipline, takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of sacrifice. Anyone that has mastered a skill went through some grueling process, but it was worth it for them. So in the words of the philosopher Nietzsche, it's kind of like the idea of finding those things that is worth suffering for. Like you choose something, and yes, it's difficult. Yes, you make a lot of sacrifices, but you're doing it because at the end, it makes you better. You want to have that. So yeah, I think that was a big one for me. Understanding that learning doesn't have to be fun all the time. Sometimes it's difficult, and once we understand the process, it's okay. When we find one day that we're bored, we know it's just part of it, and that's fine. So it's when we have the wrong expectations of what it is to learn and master something that then we get frustrated. So if we think it's just going to be easy, we're not going to have tough days, then when they do come, we think there's something wrong with us. Like, oh, maybe it's just me. I should try something else. But if someone came along and was very honest about the process, which is what I tried to do in the book, like, okay, I knew this was coming. I knew one day this was not going to be fine. I knew one day I was going to be frustrated. It was going to be tough. I would feel bad about it. But that's all right. Tomorrow's a different day.
You know, I think you should have a kids version of the book because I look at my kids and they see everything sped up on YouTube. So you draw a painting in
Yeah.
5 seconds. So they've
Yeah.
learned that there should be no patience. I should be able to pick up a pen and draw a masterpiece in 5 seconds, and it doesn't happen. So they get frustrated.
Exactly.
I suck at this. It's amazing.
Even though kids, they seem to be way more resilient than adults. I mean, they try things and they fail and they keep trying. Look at them trying to learn how to ride a bicycle. Like they fall and then get back up. But adults, they fall once and like, this is not for me. I'm changing things. Like, what? You just forgot what it was to fail and that it's okay and that it's part of the process and eventually you will get better. So that's one of the greatest lessons. Like, no skill can resist the attack of consistent and deliberate practice. If you keep doing it and you put in the effort, you will get better. It's inevitable. Doesn't matter how much you think you suck. No, you will get better. Something interesting there too is that there's the obsession of being the best. So sometimes you'd say, well, if I can't be the best, then why bother? So if you're not 6'5" and you want to be a basketball player, you think like, well, what's the point? Well, the point would be that you love basketball and you want to get better. So, for example, Michael Phelps, he didn't know when he started swimming that he was going to become Michael Phelps. He just loved swimming. And if you love swimming as much as he did, you would just swim. And you would try to be your best. It doesn't have to be the best. Isn't that not noble enough to become your best? To do the best you can and wear yourself out trying to do it? I think so. So that's kind of what I'm proposing.
Absolutely. So let's jump to the quick fire questions. What's
Sure.
your second favorite business book?
Second favorite business book.
Assuming yours is your favorite. That's right.
No, there is a one favorite. Mine would be down, but I'll become better as I work more on my writing. Anything Robert Greene, I absolutely love. So The Loss of Human Nature was a fun, wonderful book. I read it and I thought I could spend the rest of my life learning these principles and trying to apply them, and it would not be enough. So he is my favorite author, and that's an amazing book.
All right. And what do you wish you knew when you were 20?
um, Two things. One, that it's all about people. So that's the most important thing in the world. It's like the connections you have in the sense of like the people you love and love you back and your friends. I think I focus way too much on work and other things that didn't really matter. So I wish I knew that the most important thing in the world is really people. Everything we do and everything we are is related to other people. So having that one would have been really important. And then the other one was just have fun along the way. My profession is real estate, but I have no identity tied to it. So I'm a real estate investor, and I built a company because I wanted to be financially free, and I'm very close to getting there. But then I look back and it's like I didn't have that much fun along the way because I thought that if I worked really hard, that I would shrink the time frame that it would take me to be financially free, and then things, as they do, they came in the way, and then it took longer than I thought it would. So that idea of like, I'm just going to work really hard at this and then I will have fun. You don't know what's ahead of you. You might as well be having fun right now because you don't know what's going to happen later. So those two things, one, it's all about people. And the second one, just have fun along the way. It's important.
Thank you very much for sharing. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.